Slither is a 2006 American science fiction black comedy horror film written and directed by James Gunn, starring Elizabeth Banks, Nathan Fillion, Tanya Saulnier, and Michael Rooker.
From Universal Pictures comes a film so shocking,
We've got a real problem here.
so disgusting,
Don't let him in your mouth!
it will change the face of horror.
They're doing things to people, turning them into some kind of monsters.
How's everybody's evening? Good?
Something's wrong with me.
Slither.
Every day there is just a new reason to never want to take these things off. Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm John, the host. Halloween is right around the corner. Last year I talked about Trick or Treat, very underrated comedy horror film, and this year we're looking at James Gunn's debut film, 2006 Slither. So this movie is about a meteor crashes into the fictional town of Wheelsy, South Carolina, and Grant, that's right, a local wealthy resident comes into contact with a sinister alien force which sets in motion a violent thrill ride that affects his wife Starla and the other residents of the town. This is not the greatest film, nor one of my favorite films that I've ever reviewed. However, there's plenty to warrant a look back at Slither, mostly the makeup effects, performances from Michael Rooker and Nathan Fillion, as well as some over-the-top comedy horror moments that make this film definitely at least worth your time. This is the directorial debut of James Gunn of Guardians of the Galaxy fame, soon to be Suicide Squad 2. Feels like a complete relative to things like Night of the Creeps, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, From Beyond, Society. He kind of rose through the ranks through the whole trauma system. You even get a Stan Lee-esque Lloyd Kaufman cameo in Slither, although I think he actually had like some speaking lines, but that didn't make it to the final cut, unfortunately. It definitely feels like one of the more ambitious films for a first-time director, especially given this type of budget with $15 million, because the gore in this one is completely over the top. This film holds absolutely nothing back. You have everything from child murder to extraterrestrial rape, which is something that you don't see in more mainstream horror films, especially after the 2000s. Brutality and bleakness and nihilistic nature of this film could really be the reason why it turned off such a general audience, because this wasn't initially marketed as a B-movie romp. It actually, if you look at the trailer, it looks like it had some money behind it, and it did. Like I said, it had a $15 million budget, which is huge for a first-time filmmaker. Yes, James Gunn already had some screenwriting under his belt and wrote some other features, but it's rare to see, especially for a horror film that could usually be made a lot more cheaply, seeing this type of budget for a horror sci-fi around this time. Because the film only made $2.8 million. This was a financial failure. Ebert and Ruppert hated this film, but again, I feel like they kind of judged it not on its own merits. Roger Ebert was quoted saying that he had zombie fatigue or zombie film fatigue at this time. So it's just interesting to think, like, was it this film that really turned them off and turned off the mass audiences, or were the general public not ready for the horror comedy genre to kind of make a resurgence at this time? I don't know. I feel like it's definitely a competently made film. It is shot extremely well, has okay-ish enough CGI effects for the time. It didn't look cheap, even though it did have that like B-movie feeling to it. So for all intents and purposes, this movie should have been more of a hit. What really set it apart was the incredible makeup effects and practical effects in this film. Michael Rooker's evolving makeup is extremely impressive. The only problem with it I see is that the more evolved his monster became, it gave him like physically less room to move and emote through a lot of the makeup. He's just as creepy beforehand. Like the scene where he is like trying to make love to his wife is extremely unsettling, as unsettling as anything in the film with him in full makeup. There's a nice like in between sweet spot where he is just starting to get like these weird alien like boils and bubbles, where he is given a chance to, like I said, emote through all the makeup and stuff and come off as real creepy and terrifying. But by the end of it, he's literally, all you could see of Michael Rooker is parts of his face, and the poor guy has so much like fake teeth prosthetics in his mouth and just like dripping with KY. It looks like it's pulled straight out of From Beyond or The Thing. And although cool, I do feel bad for Michael Rooker. And also very impressive is the giant Brenda, who is just like stuffed with all the slugs. It shows you kind of like a queen bee-esque thing. It's just like fantastically disturbing. It reminded me of Pearl from Blade or Wang from Big Trouble in Little China when he kind of like blows up. This was so cool and so gross and creepy. Again, not like super CG. This was all, they had to construct this like disgusting monstrosity, and it was extremely effective. Other things like the corrupted deer was very reminiscent of John Carpenter's The Thing with the dog that's like face kind of splits open. So there's so many homages paid, and I know when this film came out, it was just like, oh, this is just a blatant ripoff of Night of the Creeps. And yes, even James Gunn said, you know, of course it was influenced by it, but there's so many other homages to other creature features and sci-fi, you know, Lovecraftian horror that this took from in a great way, not a rip-offy way. Let's talk more about the cast in this film, because I think that without the three leads oozing charisma just as actors, I think this film probably would have fallen apart, or at least been a lot less enjoyable. Starting with Nathan Fillion. He's just so goddamn likable. Like, Nathan Fillion is great in everything he does, and every time he wasn't on the screen, I was just like waiting for another, you know, Nathan Fillion moment. He's just does that every guy just so well. He's nailed that. He's made a whole career out of the kind of everyman. Like, he's hunky enough, but he's not like movie star, you know, great looking, so it's all very believable. His performance just grounds the batshit craziness of the situation that everyone's in this film. This is a textbook character for Michael Rooker. He is just so uniquely bizarre in and out of makeup. He just has this like strange unsettledness about him, just as an actor in general. As creepy and just gross, like watching him try to make out with Elizabeth Banks as it is like watching him eat a person as a zombie, as Merle in the Walking Dead series, or even close-ups of his mouth eating chocolate-covered pretzels in Mallrats.
Oh. Yes. Oh, good. Very nice.
Michael Rooker has that just off-putting, but also like he's so rad. I love watching anything that Michael Rooker's in, but also I'm always just like, God, he just makes my skin crawl with just like his mannerisms and how he carries himself. Elizabeth Banks wasn't really given a chance at all to show her usual comedic, you know, chops in this film. I feel like it was a waste casting someone like her in this role, because I know of how capable she is of a comedian. And in this film, because it's so, you know, over the top, I was just waiting for that like standout comedic performance from Elizabeth Banks, and it just never comes. And so that's what felt kind of disappointing, her just like relegated to the straight man. So I was kind of disappointed with her overall character for the most part. They give her like the stereotypical, you know, victim at first, and then she does, you know, kind of turn into a badass as the movie goes on, and that's cool. But just the performance as a whole, it's just like, performance was kind of flat. There's no fault to her, and there's no knock on her like having no talent or anything. She's extremely talented. It was just the way the character was written. The rest of the performances range everywhere from cringeworthy to fine. I don't know if it was intentionally everyone was supposed to kind of play very placid and unremarkably, because when everyone, and it's like everyone across the board, turns into this like weird hive mind zombie creature, they all kind of ramp it up, and everything from the walk to the cadence of how they talk and the synchronization of just like the scares, that all comes off as really neat. So, you know, everyone in human form, and again, I don't know if this was a choice, is somewhere between hillbilly and boring, and then just kind of get really interesting when they go into like creature form. Particularly the Strutmeyer family, that scene was probably the most disturbing and effective as far as like hitting that horror tone goes, of just, you know, I don't like seeing children being like murdered and stuff particularly, but in this it was very effective, like how a lot of the worst, you know, most terrifying horror scenes happen off screen, like when Michael Rooker first starts changing and then like he sees that dog and you just hear the dog yelp like off screen. Extremely effective. It was, you know, your mind kind of fills in the blanks of what just happened, and it's more terrifying than if you just were to see some kind of bad effects or you know, even, you know, decent effects. I don't know. I just like filling in the blanks that way. And that scene in which the sister is trying to break in to save her two little sisters, like their screams and just that tension of the slugs and everything coming up the stairs is just really effective and kind of disturbing in a great way. And then seeing the aftermath of the family just kind of change and them all trying to grab her out of the truck. Better horror moments that James Gunn achieved in this film. You could see some attempt at an underlying, you know, social indictment on American consumerism here. It felt kind of like a Jim Jarmusch's like The Dead Don't Die, even though The Dead Don't Die came out, I believe, in 2019. This is what humans really are by consuming everything until it's just one giant hive mind. Especially, it kind of pokes fun at rural red state America in kind of a more lighthearted way. It feels mostly harmless, but it does have that kind of like underlining tone of social commentary. You could tell that James Gunn has definitely honed his craft since Slither. His writing has gotten better. The comedy has definitely gotten better. If you watch like Guardians of the Galaxy films, you could tell that he is just a lot more polished. The jokes and all that felt very clunky. I didn't really laugh at at the attempted humor. The only thing that I like chuckled at or smiled at was just the absurdity of some of the scenes, and Nathan Fillion's just like, oh shit, like constant look on his face, or, you know, his little one-liners were great, but that I feel is just so Nathan Fillion and not so much like James Gunn writing. But if you're like me and like seeing the evolution of filmmakers as a first feature, this is pretty incredible. This was a great, you know, first at bat for James Gunn, and it definitely shows later on, you know, what kind of a filmmaker he was to become. And I think if you are a fan of James Gunn, this is a must watch. I think of all the movies that this is compared to, it felt like David Cronenberg's Shivers probably is the most apt comparison, which is a fantastic film. One of his earlier films. It feels like almost like a remake or a sequel to that, or it could be. But this is just way more comedy infused, almost to the detriment of this film. Could go super satirical, you could go kind of like, or just play it straight like Shivers did with Cronenberg, and this is just kind of more over the top comedy, which I don't know. I don't know if I would say I wish it kind of scaled back a little bit, but it has something for everyone. If you're in there for more of just like some jokes to laugh at, some chuckle-worthy jokes, then it has that in there for you. The comedic tone didn't really land with me as much as I'd liked it to. I think I was more entertained by, like I said, just the absurdity of these situations. The makeup is just so fantastic. The kill count is huge. It has kind of a nihilistic ending and there's like a little after credit scene, which is also very reminiscent to the Night of the Creeps ending, which in fact that wasn't even the original ending. That was the ending that the studio kind of made them go back and shoot. So I don't know if that was like a wink to the audience. It's like, oh, you know, everyone's going to call us a Night of the Creeps ripoff, so we're going to put in like the ending that they didn't want in there. I don't know if James Gunn was thinking that or not, but either way, it's not like I need to see a sequel to Slither. I think this was a fun one-off. This is a good time, especially around this season. It's not like a huge classic. I mean, it definitely has a cult following, but it's not something that I need to watch like once a year or anything. Once every couple of years, sure, it's a good time. It definitely has my endorsement to at least check it out once. If you want to hear this in podcast form, you could do so. Go to iTunes or Spotify, give us some ratings. You could thumbs up this video, share it around, tell everyone that we are talking about films. You could follow me at John the Host or this very podcast show at The Cult of Films, all undercase on Twitter. Until next time, keep your mask on.
What's with the spitting?